All right, let's look at another feature in After Effects called Warp Stabilizer. So sometimes when you're hand holding footage, it can get a little shaky. So there's lots of different ways to prevent this. One is to lock your footage off on a tripod. Two is you can get steady cams and fly cams to help you with keeping the video footage stabilized. Three is if you have to hand hold, get that camera and push it down into your chest and exhale and hold as still as you can while you're filming, and try not to get the camera out like this. Anytime, the further you can get your hands from the camera, the less shakiness there will be. So there are devices that you can get where you can put the camera into a rig where you can put over your shoulder, or you can get it where there's handholds that you place around the camera, and that'll help you keep your footage steady. But unfortunately, sometimes you still end up with shaky video. And so this feature called Warp Stabilize works. It's a feature in After Effects and Adobe Premiere. Basically the same tool, and it works reasonably well under certain circumstances. If you're panning or moving, it's not going to work. If it's a static shot, then it can work pretty well. So let's look at the Warp Stabilizer. So I'm starting with a blank screen. I'm going to go to File, and all the files will be provided to you in the samples folder. The files I'm using will be provided to you. I'm going to go down to Import File, and these are the shaky video files. I'm going to select the ones called Bride and Groom Shaky and Flower Shaky, and click Import. And let's start with the Bride and Groom. I'm going to create a new composition by grabbing that, dragging it down to the composition window, and let's play through the file. So you can see there's a little bit of shakiness going on. Let's stop it there. So if I were processing the whole thing, I'd set it up, let it run, go off, sit, have a cup of tea while it's running, and then when it's done, come back. I'm going to take the length of time that we're editing and make it shorter. Let's make it 2 seconds. And the reason why is because I don't want you sitting and waiting through the video for this to render. So now what I want to do for playback is I want to try to resolve that shaky video. So I go over to my effects and presets and type in stabilize. And it's going to come up with 2, color and warp stabilizer. We want the warp stabilizer. We're going to click on that warp stabilizer and just drag it onto your clip, and it does an analysis. And what it's doing is it's looking at how the video is shifting, and it's trying to find center points that are common through all the movement and stabilize that footage. So depending upon how much movement there is, there's different ways that this will work. Sometimes it just doesn't work at all. You'll have to do something different. And so you'll see that in the upper left-hand corner, it's running through the frames, and it's looking at 147 frames in this particular case, and it's doing a time remapping at 75% of the way through, 147 frames in this particular case. And we've got it set to the default settings of smooth motion, subspace warp, and stabilized crop. And now it's stabilizing the footage, and when it's done, we can go back and we can play through it, and you can see that it's much smoother now. So what's it actually doing? Let's take a look. If you go down to subspace warp and set its position, scale, and rotation, and you go down to framing and set it to stabilize only, and then you'll play through it, you're going to see at the edges how the frames are being shifted around to make it steadier. So anytime you use the warp stabilize, what it does is it punches in a little bit to try to straighten out the edges. So you're going to lose a teeny bit of resolution anytime you do the warp stabilize. And that is just a trade-off. And usually, hopefully, it's not noticeable. Most of the time it isn't, if it only needs to punch in a little bit. There's other things you can do. So you can modify the smoothness. You can choose to go for no motion, which is a higher standard. Let's set it back to its settings here. And there's even an advanced component down here that you can spend even more time working with, experimenting with, and the idea is that I can make a piece of video that was shaky, really smooth. Now, I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna click this little tab here and go back to my project folder, and I have another one called Flower Shaky. I'm gonna start a new composition by clicking on that, dragging it down to the composition window. I'm just gonna play through about 30 or 40 seconds of this, right? So let's stop it about right there. I'm going to take the timeline and I'm going to shorten it, all right? And then I'm going to drop that warp stabilizer on it. And I'm going to let it do its thing. Now, what you're going to discover is that this is, it's not going to work. The reason why is because you've got this pan here happening as the video is moving down. It's trying to stabilize everything all at once. So if you do anything like a pan or zooming in or something like that, the warp stabilizer is not going to be able to fix that piece of footage. At least most of the time, I haven't had any success with that. But if it's a steady cam type of shot where you just got it pretty much the same all the way through, it's the same layout, it can work. And it can be a lifesaver. It can really help with stabilizing footage. So now it's running through. We've got 125, 400 frames or so, or 275 frames. It's halfway through, and we've got it set to its default smooth motion, subspace warp, stabilized crop, and it's almost done. And I just wanted to show you how it works when it works well and how it works when it doesn't. All right. Let's give it a few more seconds here. And so that's why I took the timeline and I truncated it. If you really needed to run the whole thing, you'd set it up, let it run. You might have to go off, like I said, have a cup of tea, or have a little breather, and come back. And so now it's stabilizing. Now let's run it and see what we end up with. Right? Okay. So you tell me whether or not you think this works. So you see it's got this weird kind of a warping here, and it's to me that's not effective, right? So that's the warp stabilizer. Sometimes if it's a static shot, it's a little shaky, you can do a really good job of fixing it. This tool is in Adobe Premiere and in After Effects. It seems to run about the same in either application. It doesn't seem to run any better in After Effects than it does in Premiere. You can run it from either one. All right, let's stop there. Meet you on the other side.